The 1920s. As America's economic boom in the 1920s began to rise, technological progress led to mass production. Advertisement played a big role on helping the economy and companies grow. Advertising changed from simply announcing the product to persuading people they needed or deserved to own the product. The main way advertising used was through newspaper and through sport figures and celebrities. Motor cars, tobacco, washing machines, alcohol, and food products helped build brand loyalty, and the cycle of consumerism was what made the economic boom rise in America. This went on to become a multimillion-dollar business. Importance of radio in the 1920s. Radio created and pumped out American culture onto the airways and into the homes of many families across the United States. Syndicated radio programs began in the late 1920s. Entertainment listeners gathered around to listen to sports, news, and broadcasts. Advertisements were broadcasted in radios too. Radio helped sports and businesses get more spotlight and news spread quicker. The KKK. The KKK was founded in 1866 by ex-Confederate soldiers and other Southerners who opposed Reconstruction. The Klan went beyond just targeting blacks, and branded its message of hate including Catholics, Jews and foreigners. The Klan promoted patriotism and advocated white supremacy. The Klan consisted with 3 million to 8 million loyal middle-class upper-class white men. The first Red Scare. The Red Scare was a period in the United States history when there was containment of communism investigations, and rounding up and deportation took place because people feared people within their community for communism. Even people in the government were suspected of being communist spies. This caused fears of subversion in the United States following the Russian Revolution. Following that there was a bombing at Wall Street which killed 38 and left thousands injured. Popular fads in the 1920s. Popular fads ranged from athletic to ludicrous acts. The most popular fads were dancing steps called the Charleston. The Charleston was a marathon dance, which you danced for 45 minutes and rest for 15. There was also the buzzard flagpole sitting where a person sat on top of a tall pole for the longest time. People also play said crossword puzzles, jazz, and baseball. Henry Ford. Henry Ford was a man from Michigan who was the most influential American innovator who went on to work from a small machine shop to becoming an engineer to owning a company that would produce one of the most important and innovative cars, the Model T, known to be cheap and luxurious. Henry was the man who perfected the assembly line to make cars quick and cheaper, and he once worked with Thomas Edison to get where he got. Charles Lindbergh. Charles Lindbergh was an American aviator who rose to international fame in 1927 after becoming the first person to fly solo and non-stop across the Atlantic Ocean in his custom M2 aircraft with longer fuselage and longer wingspan to accommodate the weight. He traveled from NY to Paris on the 21st of May, 1927 to win a prize of $25,000. A crowd of 150,000 people gathered to witness a historic moment. Prohibition. The 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which banned the manufacture, transportation and sale of intoxicating liquors, ushered in a period in American history known as Prohibition. Although it was effective for some time, there was illegal smuggling and private clubs who sold alcohol. These were called bootleggers. Crime started to rise, and at the end Congress adopted the 21st Amendment, which ended probation in 1933. Women in the 1920s. Women in the 1920s were known to be young women who had energetic freedom, embracing their lifestyle. Viewed as immoral and outrageous, women drank, smoked, and dated whoever they wanted. After World War I, women had higher wages than what they had during peacetime. This gave them hope for them to achieve the 19th Amendment, which granted them the right to vote. Women started having equal rights. Sacco and Vanzetti case in 1921. Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, both Italian Americans, were convicted of robbery and murder. Although the arguments brought against them were mostly disproven in court, the fact that the two men were known radicals, and that their trial took place during the height of the Red Scare, prejudiced the judge and jury against them. On the 9th of April, 1927, Sacco and Vanzetti's final appeal was rejected, and the two were sentenced to the Scopes trial. Scopes trial, also called Scopes monkey trial, the 10th to the 21st of July 1925, Dayton, Tennessee, U.S., highly publicized trial, known as the Monkey Trial, of a Dayton, Tennessee, high school teacher, John T. Scopes, charged with violating state law by teaching Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. The trial's proceedings helped to bring the scientific evidence for evolution into the public sphere while also stoking a national debate over the veracity of evolution that continues to the present day. The Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance was a turning point in black cultural history. It helped African American writers and artists gain more control over the representation of black culture and experience, and it provided them a place in Western high culture, giving rise to jazz, poetry, art, and beliefs. The Lost Generation. Lost Generation, a group of American writers who came of age during World War I and established their literary reputations in the 1920s. The term is also used more generally to refer to the post-World War I generation viewed, as a result of their war experiences and the social upheaval of the time, as cynical, disillusioned, and without cultural or emotional stability. Movies of 1920s. DeMille, to westerns, such as Cruises the Covered Wagon, 1923, horror films, gangster crime films, war films, the first feature documentary or non-fictional narrative film, Robert Flaherty's Nabok of the North, 1922, romances, mysteries, and comedies, from the silent comic masters Chaplin, Keaton, and Lloyd. Labor unrest. Inflation eroded American workers' purchasing power in the months after the war. Food prices more than doubled and clothing prices more than tripled between 1915 and 1920. But most businesses refused to boost wages accordingly. The steel strike of 1919 was an attempt by the weakened Amalgamated Association of Iron, Steel and Tin Workers, AA, to organize the United States, that also included coal workers. Harding Presidency. Warren G. Harding, an Ohio Republican, was the 29th President of the United States, 1921 to 1923. Though his term in office was fraught with scandal, including Teapot Dome, Harding embraced technology and was sensitive to the plights of minorities and women. Coolidge Presidency. Coolidge presided over a strong economy and sought to shrink the regulatory role of the federal government. Along with Secretary of the Treasury Andrew Mellon, Coolidge won the passage of 3 major tax cuts. Calvin Coolidge's tenure as the 30th President of the United States began on the 2nd of August, 1923, when Coolidge became president upon his predecessor's death, and ended on the 4th of March, 1929. 1928 election. The 1928 United States presidential election was the 36th quadrennial presidential election, held on Tuesday, the 6th of November, 1928. Republican Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover defeated the Democratic nominee, Governor Al Smith of New York. Hoover was the last Republican to win a presidential election until 1952. Stock market crash. Stock market crash of 1929, also called the Great Crash, a sharp decline in U.S. stock market values in 1929 that contributed to the Great Depression of the 1930s. The Great Depression lasted approximately 10 years and affected both industrialized and non-industrialized countries in many parts of the world. The proliferation of debt, a struggling agricultural sector and an excess of large bank loans that could not be liquidated. Sports in the 1920s. Babe Ruth, player Red Grange and coach Knute Rockne's domination in football, Jack Dempsey's vicious knockouts, and Man O' War's brilliant races. The sports of the 1920s have become legendary to fans around the world. This was the golden age of sports in American newspapers turned sports into an American pastime and gave relief to an American public searching for some relief after the atrocities of World War I. Halfback Red Grange and Notre Dame coach Knute Rockne led football bravely into a new era. College football was wildly popular, thanks in large part to many young men and women entering universities in post-war America. College football made money, profiting $21 million for the universities every year. Credits.